In a single week, I've taken over 350 executive actions. We've signed 300, and who ever heard of that one? And as I said in my inaugural address, the American decline is over. It's over. The golden age of America has officially begun, and I think that's a good thing for us to talk about, the golden age and the American dream. I think it's a good thing because people haven't been talking that way for a long period of time. On day one, I directed every member of my cabinet to marshal all powers at their disposal to defeat inflation and bring down the cost of daily life, and we're going to do that. You're going to see it starting to happen when we get going with the energy. The energy is going to, brought everything up, and it's going to bring everything down. I imposed a federal hiring freeze, a federal regulation freeze, a foreign aid freeze. A foreign aid freeze, isn't that nice? We get tired of giving massive amounts of money to countries that hate us, don't we? And I created the new Department of Government Efficiency, and I think it's going to be very meaningful. I terminated the ridiculous and incredibly wasteful Green New Scam, one of the great scams in history.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about President Trump and his executive order to immediately stop the flow of almost all U.S. foreign assistance. Okay, pending review, the State Department basically said, listen, we want to stop all this foreign aid going out the door and review where U.S. taxpayer dollars are going and why, and then decide which programs we want to keep and which programs we want to get rid of. Now, of course, this has already caused outrage. Okay, you have a whole lot of people across the world boo-hoo, whining, crying. They're upset. They're concerned that they're not going to get U.S. taxpayer dollars for their country. Okay, and I want to talk about it. But first, I want to play this clip here from NBC News to give us a better understanding of this executive order. And then we're going to get into some reactions, particularly from Africa, because African leaders are really, really, really worried about President Trump cutting off their aid. So without further ado, let's get into it.
We have more breaking news on this Friday night. Secretary of State Marco Rubio now ordering the U.S. to immediately stop almost all foreign aid and supplies, pending a review. That according to an internal State Department cable obtained by NBC News. Two notable exceptions here, Israel and Egypt. The State Department did not immediately return our request for comment. We want to go now.
Ain't it funny how Israel is always exempt for this type of stuff? It's just pretty hilarious. Okay, I mean, once you see all these coincidences, it's hard not to go into conspiracy theory territory when you continue to see the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. I'm just saying, right? I'm just saying.
To NBC Pentagon correspondent Courtney Cuby, who's following this. Courtney, what more do we know about why the Secretary of State is out with this order right now? And you mentioned that there's an exception, we believe, for Israel and Egypt. But what about Ukraine?
Yeah, so one thing is very clear in this order, and it is coming directly from the top. This is one of the executive orders that President Trump signed literally in his first hours after being inaugurated this week. And it was this idea that the U.S. would halt, temporarily at least, all foreign aid grants and not grant any new ones for a period of 90 days. Now, this, as I said, it's coming directly from President Donald Trump, but we're learning a little bit more about it today. The way that now Secretary of State Marco Rubio has implemented this to the State Department force around the world is by saying that there would be exceptions for, as you said, specifically military financing. So foreign military sales and financing for Egypt and Israel. And then there's also an exception for humanitarian emergencies. So that means that if you have a location where there is humanitarian aid, emergency disaster aid going to a place, that will continue in some cases. And in addition to that, Tom, the salaries of the people who will be distributing that, working to help with that humanitarian aid, they will also continue to be paid, including local people on the ground in those locations. So we know now that those are the exceptions. But you asked about Ukraine. It's not 100% clear at this point. Right now, as it is written, there is no indication that Ukraine will have any kind of an exception. They could go without this foreign aid for a matter of up to 3 months, Tom.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that. Okay, now This foreign aid has been hitting the world hard, okay? And you have Marco Rubio now adding some exceptions. Like, for example, for life-saving medicine, medical services, food and shelter, stuff like that, right? And I think one of the reasons why he added this exception is because you quite literally had some of these leaders in some of these poor countries and some of these poor continents across the world lashing out over this, freaking out. Like, for example, the leader of Africa CDC, he went to CNN to lash out about this, essentially claiming that the U.S. not giving foreign aid to Africa is going to lead to a global pandemic.
If we need to give an idea, in 2024, we got $8 billion of support from the U.S. to African continent, and 73% went to the health sector. It means today the U.S. is the main partner that we have bilaterally and also multilaterally through a number of organs and organizations. What we see as a trend today in Africa, it's not just the pause from the U.S. government, but it's also the reduction from assistance from other Western countries. And that one is a major threat to not only Africa, but to the world. And as Africa CDC is projecting with this trend to have around 2 to 4 million additional deaths annually. And that one will also increase the likelihood occurrence of pandemics. This is why we think that we need to continue.
So, Dr. Kaseya, Dr. Kaseya, I want to talk about the mpox breakouts. I want to talk about the Marburg virus, and if there isn't funding to try and ensure that these breakouts don't spread, what that means for the rest of the world and for America in particular.
When I declared mpox public health emergency of continental security in Africa in August 2024, we had only 6 countries. Today, we have 21 countries affected. And out of $1 billion pledged by partners, including $520 million from the US, we only got 47% of this money. Without funding, this mpox that is affecting almost around 45% of African countries will continue to spread. Don't forget that mpox in 2021 affected the US, Europe, and other continents. There is a huge risk if we don't get this funding pledged by Western countries that mpox can even become a next pandemic.
Yeah, so you see that, you heard that? The general director of Africa CDC is saying, listen, if you don't give us money to help us fight the HIV and AIDS epidemic and also other diseases as well, too, that are an issue throughout Africa, if you don't give us the money, then we can have another global pandemic, right? This is what he is claiming in a full-blown freak out over President Trump saying, hey, you know what? You guys got to stand on your own 2 feet, okay? You cannot be living off the United States forever, okay? You can't be living off U.S. government welfare. You can't do it. But again, this is something that, again, seems to be causing a lot of issues, right? Again, particularly in Africa. But not all of Africa's leaders feel that way. You have the former Kenyan president, Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta, and I probably pronounced his name wrong, and I know that people in the comment section are going to say, you pronounce his name wrong. I understand and I get it, but Mr. Kenyatta here essentially laughed at the other African leaders who are upset with President Trump for cutting off foreign aid. Take a look.
People the other day crying, oh, I don't know, Trump has removed money. He said he's not giving us any more money. Watu wanalia. Why are you crying? It's not your government, it's not your country. He has no reason to give you anything. I mean, hey, you don't pay taxes in America. He is appealing to his people. Shauri yenu bana. Eh? This is a wake-up call for you to say, okay, what are we going to do to help ourselves? Instead of crying, tujiulize, what are we going to do? Haya, ametoa hiyo pesa, sasa tutafanya namna gani jameni? What are we going to do? Yeah? To support ourselves. Because nobody is going to continue holding out a hand there to give you. It is time for us to use our resources for the right things. We are the ones who are using them for the wrong things.
Boom. Boom. I 100% agree with this guy. I 100% agree. I think that it would be a fair trade to give away AOC and to get this guy, right? I think that's a fair exchange because he seems to have more common sense when it comes to foreign aid than a vast majority of U.S. politicians, okay? In 2024, we gave Africa $8 billion, okay? Sub-Saharan Africa, that is, okay? Black Africa, right? We gave them $8 billion. Now, how much of that actually went towards the people, okay? I don't know. Who knows, okay? But we do know there's a lot of corruption that is prevalent throughout all of sub-Saharan Africa. And a lot of that money just ends up in the hands of the dictators, the warlords, the presidents. I mean, there's a whole lot of corruption, okay? A lot of this money, it doesn't actually end up helping the people at all, right? It just enriches the elite, the powerful in these countries. And, you know, that's what happens. So I think that it is fair to reevaluate how much money we are giving to these countries and where the money is going and what it's being used for, because I personally think that these countries just can't be dependent on the United States forever. At some point, they got to solve their own problems, right? They got to stand on their own 2 feet. And yes, I know their problems are complicated. I know the left will say that their problems were caused by white supremacy and therefore the white man is indebted to them forever. I'm just not going for that, right? I'm just not going for that, okay? I personally think that it's best for Africa to stand on their own 2 feet. I mean, I'm being told almost every single day that the African slaves that were brought over here to the United States of America, they built everything, right? They built everything. They built the country. I'm still trying to figure out why the Africans haven't made Africa the greatest and most prosperous continent on earth, right? In the history of this country. I mean, they got all the resources. They got 90% of the world's platinum. Between South Africa and Zimbabwe, 40% of the global gold reserves between South Africa and Ghana, cobalt, 70% of the world's supply. You have diamonds, the largest producer, oil and gas, Nigeria, Angola, Libya, Algeria, agriculture. They're a major producer of cocoa and coffee. Again, I'm trying to figure out with all of these natural resources, why isn't Africa great? Why do they need our help? They shouldn't need us. Again, the African slaves, they built everything in America. According to the pro-blacks, the woke revolutionaries, the kings and queens, right? the ancestors built everything here in America, right? According to them. This is what they say. So the ancestors should be able to build up Africa the same way. I don't get it. I don't understand. That's a disconnect. That's a disconnect. So, you know, listen, in all seriousness though, right? Jokes aside, which, you know, I'm kind of not joking. I understand the neoliberal argument post-World War II for why the U.S. uses foreign aid, right? It was to contain communism. It was for economic and trade interests, building alliances, establishing moral U.S. global leadership, you know, humanitarian assistance. I mean, we could essentially say, hey, we're the moral leaders of the world, right? We're superior to Russia, China, all these other countries. We're replacing the old European empire. We are superior because of the amount of aid that we give, right? And it also helped out with strategic alliances, military, trade, stuff like that. I get it. I 100% understand it. I just think that it is now time to let these countries stand on their own 2 feet, right? They should be able to survive without us, okay? I mean, we have so much technology, right? Africa has so many resources. Hey, I'm totally fine with leaving them alone, right? I'm totally fine with leaving them alone outside of fair trade. And hey, you can do whatever you want to do, okay? But at some point, you have to get off of U.S. government assistance. You got to do for yourself. You got to do for yourself. And at the end of the day, I think that's better for America. And I also think it's better for Africa. It really is. They should want to be dependent on us. They should want to be independent of the United States of America. Okay, if you can't survive without the United States of America, then I don't know, man. Maybe you shouldn't be a country, right? Any of these countries in Africa, they're like, nah, we can't survive without the United States. Well, should you be a country, right? Should you be independent if you're dependent on us? I'm just saying. I think that it is a good thing to be America first. I think America first is good for the world. That doesn't mean American isolationism, right? Because that's how they try to frame it. Oh, you're isolationist. No, I'm not an isolationist. No, what we're saying is that, hey, we want to look out for us first. Okay, and once we get our stuff together, we can look out for other folks. But right now, we got to look out for us. Okay, we're struggling. We got problems that we got to fix. And, we can't take care of the world when we can't even take care of ourselves. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.